I'm sure you've seen ornamental kale and cabbage in the landscape, but have you ever tried using it in a floral arrangement? It's amazing. Today I'm going to show you how to make ornamental cabbage and kale the star of the show in your arrangement. My name is Ellen Frost. I'm building a community of flower lovers online at FlowerMore. You can check it out on my website, ellenfrost.com. Also, subscribe to my free weekly newsletter, FlowerNerd. You can see the link in the description. So today I am going to be leaning into cabbage. If you haven't used them in design, these are very different than the ones that you see in the landscape. First off, the stems are very long. So I always have people ask, how did you use them if the stems are so short? So the stems are only short if you're using landscape or bedding cabbage. So these cabbage and kale are designed for cut flowers, which means they have very long stems. The other thing that it's important to learn right off the bat is the difference between cabbage and kale. They're in the same family, but the difference is that cabbage has these rounded petals and kale has these more frilly petals. So these are the two we're going to be using today. This is crane white. This is crane white cabbage, and this is white ruffle kale. I'm going to be using both of those today. Also going to be using this cabbage, which has a really purplish center. This is called crane pink, even though it's mostly purple. And one more that I'm going to be using today, which I love so much, and we rarely have it here in the shop. This one is called black kale. It is a really dark, frilly kale, and it's perfect for late fall and even early winter. And one of the tricks about these plants is that they get more colorful the colder it gets outside. So when everything else dies when it gets colder, kale and cabbage actually really come into their own and really become much more colorful. If you cut your cabbage and kale early in the fall, like sometime in like late September, even October, they're going to be mostly green. And maybe you need that for your design, but if you want to wait until it gets really colorful, then you want to wait until it gets cold, almost to freezing at night. So I'm going to just start with this purple bowl. I've had this purple bowl for a while and I'm never really sure how to use it, but today it's the perfect time to try it. So I'm going to be using a floral mechanic in my bowl today, and this is chicken wire. It's a coated chicken wire with 1-inch holes. You can get this online. I'll put a link in the description of where I get mine. And I'm going to first just make what I call a chicken wire burrito. I'm sure if you've been following me, you've seen me make a chicken wire burrito before, but for those of you who are new here, it's just a tube connected with my little ends. And then I'm going to fold the ends in on themselves so that it fits inside my bowl. Now there's nothing super special about the exact shape of sticking it in your bowl. You mostly just want to make sure that it squeezes in there. The only thing you want to make sure, I'll just show you, pull it out again, is that you have 2 points of entry for your stems. I just had somebody in my FlowerMore online community ask this question the other day. She had used chicken wire in a vase arrangement, but she had only used it flat across like this. So basically more like a screen. And when she put her flowers in, everything tipped over to the side. And that's because her stems only had 1 point of entry. They didn't have any second point of entry to really hold them in place. So that's where the chicken wire burrito comes in handy. And if you want to learn more about my FlowerMore community or learn any more of the tips that we share in there, I'll put a link in the description. All of our YouTube followers get a 30% off discount. So if you want to join us inside my FlowerMore community, you can check out the link in the description. So now that I have my burrito made, squish it in. And it's pretty secure, but I'm going to put a couple of pieces of waterproof tape over the top of it because the cabbage is very heavy. It is a very top-heavy focal, and so I want to just give this chicken wire a little bit extra support. All right, so I've got my chicken wire, I've got my waterproof tape. I'm just going to fill it up with water. Now, the first thing you have to consider when creating an arrangement with kale or cabbage as the focal is that these blooms are huge. So you have to choose a vessel that is proportionate to the size of these blooms. Don't try to get a small vase and squeeze these in. They really want to be the star of the show, and in order to do that, they need a lot of space. So this is about a 6-inch wide bowl. That's going to give me plenty of space. And I'm going to start with a little bit of foliage. Now, I'm going to make this a pretty simple design. Not a lot of elements, but I am going to start with some eucalyptus. This is good as fragrance, also as a little bit of texture. And today I do not have a line flower. Usually I like to add a line flower to my design, but I don't have any available to me today. So my eucalyptus is going to act a little bit like a line flower. So as I'm starting to think about my shape, I want to think about proportion. This is going to be kind of a low, wide arrangement. I don't want this to be any taller than 1.5 times the height of my vase, but also this low, wide bowl lends itself to a lower, wider arrangement. So I'm going to get my eucalyptus in, and this is probably going to be my tallest element. And you can see that I'm leaning into a wide design style. In this case, I'm not going to totally cover my mechanics just yet. Because the cabbage and kale are so big, they are going to take up a lot of the room. So I don't have to overfill or over green. That's what we call it when we're just starting with our foliage, to green an arrangement. I don't have to over green it. I'm just going to get that started. All right, so that's just the start of my shape. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of a background filler flower in, and today I'm going to be using some Sweet William, and I love that this Sweet William kind of picks up the little bit of pink in the cabbage. So I'm going to use this just as a low background filler flower. I'm making sure to take off all my leaves. I don't want to have any leaves in my bowl. And I love Sweet William. It has a lot of great assets. It lasts a long time. It comes in a lot of colors, but it is not a focal flower. It's really a filler background flower. So I'm going to keep it kind of low, and I'm going to use it really just for the background. And again, I don't have to overfill this because the cabbage and kale are really big. They're going to take up a lot of the room of the design. All right, so next I'm going to go with my frilly kale. So I'm going to be using both of these frilly kales today, the white and the dark. And the reason that I'm starting with these is because unlike the cabbage, the frilly kale feels a little bit like it should be secondary to these, almost like a secondary focal. So I'm going to keep these pretty short, and I'm going to start filling in a little bit. Now I'm going to go with some of these deep, dark black ones. I love these. They add such contrast. And you can fluff them up if you want with your hand. You can use your hand to just open them up if they feel like they're still a little bit closed. We often do this too, which is just like a twisting move. You can see that that opens up your cabbage really well. And these are really like indestructible. So don't be afraid to manipulate them or move them around a little bit. I'm going to do the same with this one. Just give it a little twist. And you can see that just fluffs it right up. And I'm keeping everything pretty low. These are very top heavy. And if I wanted to use them in a big design, I would want to make sure that my vase really supported the entire stem so that everything stayed in place. Cute. All right, next I'm going to use a couple of, again, secondary focals. These are White Swan marigolds, late season White Swan marigolds. They look gorgeous. I love that they're so branchy because I'm going to be using them short, so I can cut off each of these side shoots. And White Swan is marketed as a white marigold. You can see that it's really more of like a really light butter yellow, but it is pretty close to creamy, you know, a cream colored. So I'll show you one of the reasons why I love them in this, because again, they're going to be picking up some of that cream in the cabbage and in the kale. You can see it even a little bit more, how those colors really complement each other. So I'm going to add a few of these in. Late season marigolds are such a treat because we don't have a lot of actual flowers left in the field, and marigolds are one of the flowers that can take a little bit of a frost and hold up into the mid to late fall. And in this case, I'm going to actually cluster these together, maybe in, let's see, 2 or 3. I don't want them to feel too dotted in this arrangement, so I'm going to do a little bit of clustering. And I'll do that a couple times. All right, so I'm just taking a look, tweaking a couple of little things. That's why when I put my stems in, I want them to be super clean, because sometimes I have to take them out and move them around. And if they have leaves on them or they have any sort of side shoots, it can pull everything up with it. So I want to move this eucalyptus around, no problem at all, because my stems are nice and straight. So next I'm going to put in my cabbage, and these are the flowers that are really going to feel like the focal flowers. They have nice big blooms, and I can do just the same fluffing up that I did with my kale. So I'm only going to put 2 in right now. I'm going to put a few of these whites in and give them a little twist. Just clean them up. And while the shape of the cabbage lends itself to a really round feeling design, I don't want it to feel overly round, like a dome. So in order to make sure that it is not too dome-like, I'll show you some techniques that I'm going to use to create a little bit more texture, a little more whimsy, a little more movement. So you can see that it's feeling a little, to me, a little flat. So I want to make sure I add a few things that are going to give it some whimsy and some height. So the first thing I'm going to put in are one of my favorite fall berries. This is beautyberry, or calicarpa, and it comes in this, I mean, it is like grape. There's no better description for this than grape. And their little berries look so grape-like. And calicarpa is great because it is a native, and it starts off with a lot of leaves on it, but the leaves are going to fall off, and we can use it. Oh, I love it. I don't use it that often because this is not a color palette that a lot of people ask for this time of year, but when we do have it, it's really fun to use. Calicarpa berries the beauty berries do fall off a little bit. Not once they're in the arrangement, but when you're using them, you can lose some of the berries. So just be careful. So I've got those in there. I'm going to put a couple more here in the back. This arrangement is in the round, but for some reason that feels like the front to me. Beautyberry is really easy to grow too. I have one at my house. rarely do much to it, and it always looks really beautiful. All right, so I've got my berries in. The next thing I'm gonna add is a little bit of this sort of purple or red violet Gomphrena. Gomphrena is great this time of year, sort of in the fall, because it is great fresh or dried. It looks almost exactly the same. See how branchy and green these can get. And again, I want to make all these cuts to make sure it's nice and clean. I know people feel bad taking all these side shoots off and these greens, but I had a woman who commented on one of my YouTube videos the other day, and she said, oh, cleaning the stems is the piece of the puzzle I was missing. And she said, my designs always looked too full and too green and too sort of messy. And she said, now that I know that I should clean the stems really well, she said that was going to help her in her design. So do make sure your stems are nice and clean, because it will let you have more control over how your designs look. Lastly, I want to add a few sea oats. So these are northern sea oats, and this time of year I just love to use them. They're dried, and they match every color palette. They go with every color palette. They sort of have like a beige suede color look to them, but they have this so much movement. All right, I like both sides. It's kind of a two-sided. It looks nice on all sides, but it does feel like it has front and a front, but I like both of them. So I'm just about finished, but I want to double check the edge of my vase, because I did put that tape on there, and I want to make sure, you can see right here, I want to make sure that that tape is either trimmed or covered up. So first I'm going to try just covering it up with a small little side shoot of eucalyptus. So I'm going to cut it nice and short, and then I'm going to, where is it? I'm going to try to tuck this in right where the tape is. I actually feel like you can still see it a little bit. So I might go in and just pull it up a little bit and trim it, because now that everything's in place, I'm not so worried about the tape coming off. So I'm just going to trim that. And I'm going to do that for all of the places where I have these little edges. I call this softening the edge too of the arrangement. I just don't want to have a lot of this edge of the vase showing. And you might be thinking, oh gosh, why do I have to go in and do this little teeny tiny work? But you have to remember that if this is on a dining room table, we are designing from the top down. And most of the people who are going to be viewing this arrangement are going to be viewing them sort of at eye level. And you don't want them to see these little pieces of tape or these little things that make it feel like your arrangement is not quite finished. Like you didn't, honestly, like you didn't care enough to make sure those little details were finished. There you have an ornamental cabbage and kale arrangement, perfect for the fall. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and be sure to subscribe to my free weekly newsletter, FlowerNerd. The link is in the description.